Harper and you wrote, To Kill a Mockingbird, you're going to have a couple books out before, you catch on most of the time. There's people who get lucky, and so I started looking for an agent. And I had one agent that was really interested, and they kind of strung me out all summer. It was like the summer of 2015, and he's like, "Well, I'm not sure. Let me check on this, and let me check the market, and let me do this." And what I did is I kept writing because most of them want you to have something else. And then what ultimately that agent thought, he said that he thought my project was too much like another book that a current client of his had. So I kept writing, and I kept wondering, I'm like, well, should I look for another agent or what? And I'm like, well, I have a bookstore, so I know a little bit about the process. And I've written before, so it's like I'm not just somebody who started writing. I wrote for the local paper for like 8 years. Yeah, I wrote for about 8 years for the local paper, a weekly column. And I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and do this myself. But what I did is I put together a team. So, for example, my friend, he's the illustrator. So my strength is writing, and his strength is illustrating. So he did the illustrating. And then I found another local person to do what's known as the formatting. He's a graphic designer, so he's the one that makes it look like a book. And then what I did is I used Ingram Spark, which is the company that we buy books from. Like, we use Ingram, which is one of the world's largest wholesalers, and they have a distribution. So they upload it to their system so that people in bookstores, and then they upload it to all the major wholesalers so that it's worldwide. But I know the right price to market them, because one of the things I'm sure you've seen with books is somebody says, here's my book on zombies, and it's $19.95. I'm like, well, that's nice, but I can get this mass market for $8.99 by a world famous author who I already know. Like, he already has 4 books out, and he's guaranteed to be at least okay. I mean, maybe not every book is a home run, but the next Stephen King comes out that you can buy for $24 in hardcover, and it's going to be at least entertaining. It's going to be a solid hit. So you have to price your books correctly. And then so I did use Ingram Spark, but what I do is I do the same things that every big author does, and that is I write the book, and I have a couple drafts, and then I have my wife read it. Now, you can't always just have your wife read it, but my wife happens to be a teacher. So, like, before she went into the bookstore, she had gone to college for a teacher. So my wife reads it, and she edits, she reads it for story to make sure that the flow is right. She'll make some changes, and then I use an editor that I don't have, that I'm not married to.
Okay.
Because it's nice to have a wife that is a very talented reader and is good at what she does, but it's always good to have somebody that isn't as emotionally attached to you so that she can give her opinion on it. So I use an editor that I pay, and then I do what's known as a 2-pass. So what that means is I send it to her, and by the time I send it to my editor, this is like the 4th edit, and then she edits it and sends it back to me, and then I make some changes. I make the typos that she caught. I may or may not make some of the changes she suggested, but I pay her, so I pay her for her opinion, and sometimes I use it and sometimes I don't. That's the nice thing about being self-published, is you get to make that decision, but sometimes that's the bad one. Like, for example, I had in my Totally Ninja Raccoons Meet in the Secret of Nesmic Lake, there is a Scottish fold. A Scottish fold is a cat from Britain, and I used a lot of Scottish dialogue. And my editor had me she thought I should tone it way down. And I did tone it down, but I didn't tone it down quite as much as what she wanted, because I wanted some of that Scottish brogue in there. But I thought she was right. She's like, well, that might be difficult for kids, so I am going to tone it down quite a bit. Not quite as much as what she suggested, but almost as much. And then I will make those changes, and then what I usually do is, then it's pretty much done, and then what I usually do is send it to my formatter, and then he usually, he reads it as he's formatting, and sometimes he catches one or two things. So it's like, each one has quite a bit of polish, and that's really important.
Now, the reason why I'm asking you is, how about these companies you see on Facebook? It says, hey, self-publish your book. We can publish your book over the weekend and have it back to you the following week. I mean, are they ripping people off?
Mostly, yes. I mean, it's most of the time I feel that they are ripping people off because they don't really this. Now, if you had gone through the stages yourself before you submit that, then it's okay. But then you're still paying too much because they don't edit it for you. They just kind of put it together and format it, and they just really their business is mostly gathered on numbers. So, for example, I have a guy format it to me, but he sends it to me before. So, meaning if I don't like the way it's formatted, he changes it. He just doesn't throw it together. I mean, and of course, I love the way he does it because I've done 11 books with him.
Yeah.
So they just kind of format it kind of real rough. Don't put any of that extra touch on it, and then they throw it out there. And then somebody says, "Well, how many books have you sold?" And they'll say, "Well, none," because the book doesn't look very good, and they don't know how to sell it. And
well, the reason why I say that, because I get so many books here, right? I see books where the text is slanting on the page, it's not even straight, or you flip one page, you can barely, the ink wasn't even on it enough to be able to read, and then the quality of some of these books are and they're asking $20 for the book, and you're reading it, and then you go, that's so unprofessional. I mean, when the text is not straight, and it's slanting, and then you have, words that, weren't printed with enough ink and all that stuff. And that's what I always tell these people, you got to be careful who you use, because they don't care. They're in the business to making money. They don't care if you sell your books or not. You buy 50 books or 100 books and they print them up for you. Hey, that's your problem to market them. And who's going to, especially if you want to write more than one book, and if you get something like that, you're going to look at that and you go, wow.
No, most of the time when that happens, they are, the consumer is going to be ripped off. I mean, you have to be careful. And like I said, I use Ingram Spark, which is owned by Ingram, who is a company who's been around for years. I mean, they're a wholesaler of books. So, and sometimes, even then, sometimes mistakes happen. But if a mistake happens, I call them up and I get it taken care of, because we get books here at the bookstore, and sometimes you'll get one that's been misprinted. I mean, I've had a Stephen King misprinted where they got the print backwards, or as you're putting it together, what they do is they print a book out in portions and then put them together, and sometimes some portions will get mixed up in that. So I mean, that happens that can happen with any book, but if a true professional company will take care of that.
Okay.
And most of those companies out there are fly-by-nights, yeah.
Now, before I get you to tell a scary story here, because the time is almost up, I want you again to tell people how they can get a hold of you. If you want to give out your phone number to your bookstore, feel free to do it. Where they can get these books. I think if anybody out there has a grandkid or a child, 12 and under, and maybe doesn't like reading, maybe you got to grab one of these books, because I got a funny feeling your child or grandchild's going to pick it up and start reading it.
The child's going to love this, because, like I said, I wouldn't have written 8 of these books if somebody wasn't reading them. And where you can get them, I'll give you the phone number of the bookstore. The bookstore is open 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from Monday through Saturday. We're even open on Fridays. We're open Sundays. Sundays we are open 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. And you can call this bookstore at 570-686-6600. 724-5793 and get a real person. Or, being the internet age, you can order the book at midnight in your underwear when you're sitting in front of the computer. And our website is wellsborobookstore.com, and that's a secure site. Those books will come right from our bookstore, and signed. I sign them, and if you want, you can also leave a little message, and I can personalize them. A personalized book can be really a nice touch for a child, that we can put their name in there, and that's really nice. And of course, you can buy them at any bookstore. They can order them if they don't have them in stock. You can just say, "I'd like the Totally Ninja Raccoons," and they will go right on, and they can order them for you. Or you can order them yourself online at the major retailers like Walmart.com. There's some sellers on eBay that sell them. BarnesandNoble.com, Amazon.com. Some of the other bookstores, like I said, they're available overseas in the UK. So Waterstones or an online company in Britain can order them for you. And yeah.
Well, it sounds good. So, total, it'd be a total good book for a young kid, male, female, get them into reading, get them into something, exciting. And that, I think, is awesome. Now, we got about 5 minutes. What can you come up with a scary story for tonight?
Okay, well, I'm going to use some local folklore, and I'm going to use a story that has now this is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a lot of Germanic settlements, so werewolf legends are pretty strong here in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
This one is a local legend that actually, I'm here downtown Wellsboro. I'm actually doing the radio show from the bookstore where it's nice and quiet at night. So where this happened is right up the street, probably about 3 miles, and it's called, this story was told to, I read it in the story about, because I read both fiction and nonfiction, so this was a story told by Governor Stone. Governor Stone was a governor of Pennsylvania, and he was actually from Wellsboro, Pennsylvania. We're kind of proud of that because there's only about 3,000 people, so he's the only governor that's actually came from Wellsboro, because we're a small rural town. And this story is called The Harbinger of Death. Okay. So this is a story that was told by Governor Stone. It was told to him when he was a child. So this is a small rural town, and everybody knows each other, but there was this one man who was rumored to be a pirate. He wasn't like everybody else. Most of the people knew each other, went to church with each other, would see each other, and he kept to himself. He never he'd never go to church. He'd swear a lot, he was old, he was grumpy, and there was rumors that he was a pirate or a man of ill repute, so people kind of stayed away from him. But the one local pastor, he always, tried to be friendly to him and that, and one day this man got sick, and, the local pastor, wanted to, would visit him and hope that he would get better. And a neighbor would come by, and so the old man that was rumored to be a pirate, he had gotten really ill. So the pastor and a local farmer were out were by his bedside, and they were out. It was late at night. It was getting close to midnight, and there was this noise, and they were out in the room, outside his bedroom. They were thinking that he was getting close to passing away, so they were holding vigil so that he wouldn't pass away by himself. And it was late at night, and they were sitting there reading, and then this wolf-like creature walks into the room, and they just this big jaws and just these big glowing eyes. And they just looked at each other, and they couldn't even move. And the wolf-like creature went into the old man's room, and they looked at each other and like, oh my goodness, we have to do something. So they jumped up, and just as they were jumping up, the clock struck midnight, and then they